During the Cold War, the Soviet Union had a major problem, which was defending the massive airspace of the state from US reconnaissance aircrafts or the more dangerous strategic bombers. These aircrafts had the ability to carry weapons of mass destruction at intercontinental levels, and they would deliver their bombs by flying at high altitudes, making anti-aircraft systems at the time inefficient against them. Bombers like the Convair B-58 Hustler had the ability to reach a speed of Mach 2 and had a range of over 7,000 kilometers. So a need for a new high-speed, high-altitude interceptor emerged. At the start of 1958, a requirement was issued for a manned interceptor capable of reaching speeds up to Mach 3 and heights up to 27,000 meters or 90,000 feet. Mikoyan and Sukhoi responded to the requirements, and Mikoyan was chosen to design the new aircraft. Development operations began in mid-1959, with the main goal being building a high-speed, high-altitude interceptor. Several design layouts were studied. One had the engines located side by side as on the Mig-19. Another one had the two engines stacked vertically like the English Electric Lightning, and other layouts. The first prototype of the Foxbat was a reconnaissance variant designed as YE-155R1, and it made its first flight on March 6, 1964. The wings of the prototype had fixed wingtip tanks with a 600-liter capacity, but later they were cancelled due to vibration problems. The first flight of the Interceptor prototype, which was called YE-155P1, took place on September 9, 1964, and on July 9, 1967, the aircraft was first shown to the public and immediately had the West wondering about this new Soviet fighter. Engineers at Mikoyan had a lot of engineering problems to solve when it came to designing the new aircraft. The Interceptor had to be powerful enough to reach the desired speeds, but also it must be capable of withstanding the high temperatures that came with such high speeds. It also needed to be armed with some heavy air-to-air missile in order to take down reconnaissance aircrafts or strategic bombers, and many other technical difficulties. Let's start with the first one, which was the thermal stress problem. For a high-speed, high-altitude aircraft like the Mig-25, titanium would have been a perfect solution to the thermal stress problem, but it was too expensive for the Soviets at the time and much harder to manufacture. So instead they went with nickel alloy, which made around 80% of the Mig-25 structure. Nickel alloy was indeed a much cheaper alternative than the titanium, but it came with a huge downside, which is the weight. Using nickel alloy made the aircraft insanely heavy with an empty weight of 20 tons. This would of course impact fuel efficiency and maneuverability. The wings of the Foxbat were massive, with a span of 14.01 meters. In fact, the massive size of the wings was mainly to make the aircraft airborne. And in order to reach the designated speed of Mach 3, a pair of Tumansky R-15 B300 afterburning turbojets engines delivering 73.5 kilonewtons of thrust each and 100.1 kilonewton each with afterburner. The engines provided a sufficient thrust to reach Mach 3.2, but a limit of Mach 2.83 had to be imposed, as the engines tended to overheat and overspeed at higher speeds, possibly damaging them beyond repair. The cruising speed was Mach 2.35 with partial afterburner in operation. The max speed of Mach 2.8 was not allowed for more than 5 minutes due to the danger of overheating the airframe and fuel in the tanks. Initially, the Foxbat was equipped with the TL-25 Smersh A radar. The radar was good for the aircraft's main task, which is operating as an interceptor. It was powerful, long-ranged, and resistant to jamming. But it had a major drawback, which is lacking the ability to look down, shoot down, which limited its effectiveness against low-flying targets. This meant that the Mig-25 had a blind spot for aircrafts that were flying below its horizon line, and in dogfights this would be a huge problem. The Interceptor was armed with 4 R-40 long-range air-to-air missiles, perfect for the task in hand. The R-40 is the largest air-to-air missile ever to go into production. There were 2 versions of the missile, a radar-guided version and a heat-seeking version. Normally the Foxbat would carry a mixture of both versions. The radar-guided version was 6.29 meters in length, and the infrared version was 5.9 meters. The missile had a mass of 475 kilograms, and it also had a max speed of Mach 4.5, but it would decrease to Mach 2.2 after the solid fuel rocket motor burns out, and had a range of 50 to 80 kilometers, and it could carry a warhead weighing between 38 to 100 kilograms. Though the Foxbat was mainly designed as an interceptor aircraft, it would later on be used also as a fighter aircraft. The world's first view of the Foxbat was during the 1967 October Revolution Air Show. The Soviets even provided English commentary team for Western observers, and by the end of the show a formation of Mig-25s flew in front of the cameras and conducted a display. This display of force left Americans very concerned about this new aircraft. The huge wings of the Mig-25 suggested great agility. The large engines seemed like they were a new generation of Soviet turbojet engines, and to make things worse, the Foxbat started breaking records after records in terms of speeds and altitudes. And in 1971, an Israeli radar controller clocked several Egyptian Mig-25s flying at Mach 2.5 above the Sinai Peninsula, with one Mig surpassing Mach 3. With such speeds and altitudes, Israeli defenses couldn't do much. And from an American point of view, all of this meant that the Soviets had built a better fighter than those of the NATO's. Because of this, the Americans rushed the F-15 Eagle program and even invested more into it to try catch up with what they thought to be a much better fighter than what they had. The real nature of the Foxbat would be revealed on September 6, 1976, when the Soviet pilot Lieutenant Viktor Belenko of the Soviet Air Defense Forces defected from the USSR by flying his Mig-25P to Japan. Belenko landed his aircraft at Hakodate Airport in southern Hokkaido, where he was arrested by the Japanese police, and when interviewed he requested political asylum in the US. He was later moved to the US and given political asylum, and his Mig-25 underwent severe inspection in Hyakuri Air Base, where Japanese and American technicians disassembled the aircraft into pieces to analyze it in detail. Eventually it was returned to the Soviet Union in pieces, but the inspection revealed unusual technical data. The aircraft was assembled quickly and was powered by 2 massive Tumansky R-15 turbojets, which were used before. The aircraft was mainly built with nickel steel alloy and not titanium as it was assumed. This made the Mig-25 much heavier than expected. Max acceleration or G-load was set at a limit of 4.5 G. Any acceleration more than that could damage the airframe beyond repair. Because of the Interceptor's heavy weight and massive engines, it had a max range at subsonic speed of 11,097 kilometers at low altitudes. A limit of Mach 2.8 was placed to extend the lifespan of the engines. Flights above this limit would decrease the lifespan of the engines and could even damage them beyond repair. The large wings were not to make the fighter more maneuverable, but they were simply there to make it airborne. The aircraft's radar missed low targets tracking, which meant that the Mig-25 could not target aircrafts flying beneath it. After knowing all of this, the West was no longer intimidated by the Foxbat. The Soviets, on the other hand, started developing a new-gen interceptor, which was the MiG-31. And the MiG-31 would replace the MiG-25 and was a much better aircraft, solving many of the problems that the MiG-25 suffered. The MiG-25 was used by the Soviets and other Soviet allies. It was used by the Iraqi Air Force during the Iraq-Iran war during the 80s, where Iraqi Air Force claims that the MiG-25s managed to take down at least 15 Iranian aircraft. And during the 70s, the Soviets conducted reconnaissance operations over Iran with the Mig-25RB, which was the reconnaissance variant of the MiG-25. Also in the early 70s, the USSR sent 2 MiG-25R and 2 MiG-25RB to Egypt, which were operated by the Soviet 63rd Independent Air Detachment. Detachment 63 flew the MiGs around 20 times over Sinai. Israeli defenses and interceptors could not do anything because the MiGs were too fast and too high to take down. And during the 80s, the Soviets used the Foxbat to intercept the American Blackbird SR-71, which was conducting reconnaissance operations over the Baltic Sea, but with little success. The SR-71 had the ability to sustain supersonic speeds for longer periods than the MiG-25 and could also fly at higher altitudes. Though the MiG-25 was not as good as it was thought to be, it still was a tough aircraft and was not an easy target to shoot down, and was even somewhat good for its main task, which was an interceptor aircraft, not as a fighter aircraft. The mistakes that were made in the MiG-25 would later on help the Soviets in developing the MiG-31, which was a much better interceptor than the MiG-25. This was the video. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for us, leave them in the comments, and see you in the next time.